Hello, I'm Rebecca Kimbel. With all the news on polygamy as of late, with the movie The Outlaw Prophet, with Warren Jeffs being shown on Dateline and Unbreakable with Rebecca Musser, with Anderson Cooper and Mike Watkiss bringing shows on television lately, I thought it would be a very good idea for you to hear a discussion about the inside culture of polygamy. This will be a 4-part series. Our guest is Victoria Reynolds. Victoria and I have a lot in common. We were both raised in the AUB, the Apostolic United Brethren, which is the same polygamist group that Cody Brown and Sister Wives belong to. I was married into the FLDS. You all have heard of Warren Jeffs in the news and his numerous child brides. Warren Jeffs' father, Rulon Jeffs, performed my marriage when I was a child bride. If you saw the movie Outlaw Prophet, it was very, very close to being extremely authentic. I say close because the movie was kind compared to how we grew up. I am related to many famous polygamists. Tom Green, a former TV polygamist with 5 child brides, had 3 of them that were his stepdaughters. The youngest was my niece, Linda Coons. Rolling Stones magazine referred to the Kingston clan as America's most twisted crime family. I have nieces that are married into the Kingston clan. The most notorious polygamist of all is Ervil LeBaron. He was known as the Mormon Manson. He had approximately 30 people murdered. Ervil LeBaron's brother, Verlin, was married to 2 of my sisters and 1 of my cousins. Yes, the mass murderer was my brother-in-law's brother. One of those murdered was my Uncle Rulon, who was the head of the Apostolic United Brethren and the prophet before his brother Owen Allred took his place. Of course, Owen Allred is also my uncle. With all of the news on polygamy lately, I'm very, very grateful. This gives Victoria and I an opportunity to have a discussion, to educate you about the inside of the culture, why people stay, and why they do just what they do. So from 2 women who were fortunate enough to escape polygamy, please join us in this educational conversation. And I want to thank all the big media shows, because when we first spoke out, no one cared to listen. They thought it was just too bizarre to be true. Please welcome my guest, Victoria Reynolds. The polygamist people say that they are persecuted because they're polygamist. But you and I know that if you don't go along with the prophet, the entire group shuns you and persecutes you. Your family will turn their back on you. You will lose your children. They won't speak to you. You know that they persecute you more than anybody on earth will persecute you if they can't control you. So why does the concept of outside persecution to the evil world, they're persecuting us, diminish and become godly when they persecute someone they can't control within the ranks?
You know, and it's so interesting because, quite honestly, most of those groups aren't persecuted by outsiders. Living in the outside world, as I have been, what I've come to discover, number one, that I found more love and acceptance than I would have ever found in the confines of my religion. I found a deeper connection to what I know my truth is, what my spiritual beliefs are, than I would have ever found in the confines of religion. And what's fascinating is that I found the outside world doesn't judge us nearly as much as we thought they did. You know, this whole idea of being persecuted by the outside world is big fat baloney. Nobody really cares. There's no persecution. Nobody's taking their torches and pitchforks into Colorado City and tormenting and persecuting people. That doesn't happen.
The persecution comes from
within. Persecution is inside.
Right.
And you're tormented by the people in your own community because you're different, because you don't believe exactly like they do, because you did one little thing wrong. The inner persecution was awful. That's the real reason I left.
The inner persecution was unbelievable. The amount of depression is unreal. I've never seen so many women in my life that looked forward to death as a liberator. Mm-hmm. That the punishment, or this, I'm going to call it sacrifice. They called it sacrifice, but It was punishment. It was punishment. My mother was not my father's favorite wife. She lived a horrible life. She was at the bottom of the totem pole and a servant and a slave for everybody. We lived in extreme poverty, and she looked forward to death as a liberator. She died in her 50s, and she wanted to die. She didn't commit suicide, and that's a capital sin. You'll be damned forever. But she held herself proud that no matter how bad it got, she never committed suicide. But she died young.
So what's interesting is that the number of women that are on antidepressants. The antidepressants are it's huge. Like all the women in those communities are on antidepressants. It's like a miracle pill. It suddenly makes life livable.
It's interesting how many of those women are drugged by their husbands when they get out of control.
I could certainly see that. You can't have a woman that has an opinion of her own.
And if they can't beat them and they're out in Shore Creek or someplace where the public doesn't see them, they will drug them if they're living in town. And there's a lot of polygamous families. Not everybody does this, but it's common.
Right.
There's a lot of polygamous families that might be the people next door. You don't know what goes on in that house.
Right.
Because giving the world a godly face of love is mandatory for your salvation.
Well, and you know what, though, what's fascinating is I really think that exists outside of polygamy as well. How many people behind closed doors have horrible relationships and in the name of their own faith put on a facade, go to church every Sunday, everything's fine. I want to kill that SOB. You know? Because we put on this face that everything is fine when inside they're dying. I think that happens more than in that particular culture. I think it's a disease.
It is. It's a big social disease because our culture makes us believe that if our family isn't perfect, the woman's responsible for the climate of the family, and responsible for raising the children. If she doesn't raise them right and they go wrong, it's her fault.
Right.
And all the responsibility of that family falls upon the woman. So if there's something wrong at home, it's got to be her fault. So how can she tell anybody there's something wrong at home?
Yeah, and what's really funny is it even comes down to the old quote, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Which ultimately, you know, if mom isn't happy, she makes very well known that she's not happy, and everybody else knows mom's not happy. Okay. And yet there are a lot of families and a lot of cultures where even if mom isn't happy, she's not allowed to tell anybody. She just has to buck it up and suck it in. Yes. For the face of the family. Preserve the family's dignity.
Women are taught that they must not see the elephant in the living room, that they must not see the abuse and the mistreatment and the lack of inequality, or they are not good women. What is this concept that a good woman sees no evil, hears no evil, speaks no evil, even if she's up to her eyeballs in evil?
Well, I think she sees it, and she's not allowed to acknowledge it.
Right.
Even though everything inside of her is screaming, this is what's really happening.
Right.
There's a part that says, "Oh, well, I can't I can't see that. I really blind to what's really happening, even though her inner guide, her intuition, inner guidance, whatever your name is for that, is telling her this is what's really going on. She can't see it. And even if she does see it, she's not allowed to tell anyone. So, I mean, how many women go to the minister and say, my child's being molested, and the minister says, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Right.
Or, she'll go to the minister and say, my husband is beating me, and he'll say, well, why don't you go home and be a better wife and not upset your husband?
Right.
Or you'll tell a family member that your child's being molested, and the family member says, don't cause waves in the family. Just, shut it up and don't tell anybody because you'll make the family look bad.
Right.
So all of these secrets that women are told they have to hold within themselves in order to save the face of the family, even if it's killing them to keep it quiet.
That concept of not letting anybody know that the child's been molested or being molested, that happened right in polygamy with our own relatives. And when it was reported to the prophet, he said, don't ever tell anyone that. It will be your fault if that family falls apart and those children are taken away and put in foster homes. You will be responsible for the destruction of that family. Don't you ever mention it. That's a fact.
He's outside of that culture, just in regular society. I've talked to women who were told exactly that. No religious affiliation at all. Don't you dare tell anyone because you'll destroy the family.
And when did the concern of what somebody thought become more important than that child?
I think it always has been, because up until fairly recently, children were considered property. And the family unit was a man's kingdom, and don't mess with the kingdom. And only now, only fairly recently, are children finally being seen as human beings that have human rights just as much as adults do. I mean, there's always been a level of who's entitled to what rights. First at the top is the man, then the woman, then the other various colors or shades of humanity, or that was actually even above women. It was then at the very bottom of that are children. Children did not have any rights, zero, zilch, none whatsoever. They were just property of the family. And that is starting to change. But that's how it's been for, I don't know, as long as we've had written history.
It's so sad because when a child is being beaten and molested, the opinion of the neighbors is more important than you are.
Right.
You are not valuable enough to protect.
Exactly.
That behavior says that loud and clear.
Yeah, so we grew up with a whole global society of children who do not know their own worth. I believe the reason that we have so much crime on this planet and so much hurt and so much pain and so much sorrow and the infliction of pain and suffering we cause other people is because of our own suffering and having no idea what our own worth is, because we were taught as children that we were worthless and not worthy of being protected, not worthy of our gifts, and not understanding our true value as human beings.
When we talk about value as human beings, when a man has so many wives and so many children that he has no real personal relationship with any of them, isn't that extremely devaluing to every child that never went fishing or had any time with Daddy? I know my brothers would tell me, I never in my life went fishing with my father. I never in my life went anywhere with my father. If we went anywhere with our father, it was to work and turn our money over to the church. My father would oversee the work gang.
Well, I have to tell you that I felt like a number. I was number 5. I had no idea what love was. I'd never been hugged or kissed or told I love you or any of that by either of my parents. I had no concept of what love was. I was just a number.
I think that's so amazing, because while I had lots of brothers and sisters, among my mother's children, I was number 5 and experienced exactly the same thing.
So for me, that's discovering the difference between fear and love is just that it's opened my life up in a way that I never in a million lifetimes could have imagined, because now I know what love really is. And I didn't know any of it as a child. I had no concept at all. And even the love between men and women I didn't see, because women just grew up and got married, and you would see a girl from a family, and then the next week you'd see her sitting with another family and be like, okay, obviously she got married. There was no courtship, there was no romance, there was nothing. A woman just went from living with her family, a girl, went from living with her family to somebody else's family. You saw that exchange. So I had no idea what love was. I didn't see it in my home, I didn't see it in my community, I didn't see it in the relationships around me. I had no idea.
I asked my mother about love, and she said, if you marry for the principle and you live God's laws, love will come.
Right.
I don't know where love was, but it just didn't get around to coming.
Yeah. Oh, it's like the arranged marriages. Not even in that particular culture. If you look at arranged marriages, even around the world, the belief is, well, this is, marry this person, and eventually you'll learn to love him. I think in some cases it's the kind of love that a captive eventually has for their captor.
Exactly.
The Stockholm Syndrome.
It is the Stockholm Syndrome. Polygamy is the Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't separate love from need.
Right. And so the need makes you compliant and appreciated for whatever you can get, and they interpret that as love.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one who needs compliance and needs safety, can't get it anywhere else, becomes benevolent to the captor and interprets that as love, because it's easier to get along with them if they bring in admiration and compliance, because they can't get away anyway.
Right. So eventually you just let your guard down and just allow them to control you and be nice and don't make any waves. And when you do that, hopefully you won't be in so much pain.
Exactly.
Right.
This is what we see everywhere in polygamy. If the public really knew just how wonderful polygamy is. But look at the shows, they had Big Love, Sister Wives, Love Times 3.
Mm-hmm.
Brady Williams just declared bankruptcy with Love Times 3 and all those wives.
Well, it doesn't surprise me.
Well,
you can't keep up the facade of taking care of all those families.
Not even with the TV show. Exactly. Even with the TV show, he managed to get out of the legal financial responsibility for his children.
Right, and that's ultimately what a lot of them try to do. That's why your dad never had his name on any of your birth certificates. It's as long as his name wasn't on anything, he wasn't financially responsible.
So who supports these huge families?
The American people.
Your tax dollars.
Your tax dollars.
And your tax dollar supports more than Aid for Dependent Children, WICA, and etc. It supports the schools we weren't allowed to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Like that big school Warren closed, all government funded, built on his property, the church property.
And he kept and pocketed all that money.
Yes, they had, I believe the papers were, they had 3 employees for every student that went to that school. So when the school closed, all those 3 people got unemployment on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge financial breakdown that's mind-boggling. He had a contract with Homeland Security for $1.7 million, and it was carried out in child labor. Homeland Security, Warren got that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, the FLDS got great contracts. Another one of the contracts they had was to make the O-rings for the space shuttle program.
Yeah.
They give huge government contracts, and the reason that they can is because they have child labor and because it's a community of men all working together. They can undercut anybody. They can come in with the lowest bid on anything.
And they did. They broke
several. And they pay whatever wages they want to whoever they want, and they can pick up government contracts because they can.
But the child labor wasn't paid. Only the overseers were paid, the men controlling things. And some of them weren't paid because they had to do it for God, because the church owned their house. And if they displeased them, the church would own their wives. They'd be given to somebody else.
Right. Well, and what people don't realize is, I see this discussion all the time. Why is polygamy illegal? Polygamy should be legal. Why should the government control how marital relations? And President Abraham Lincoln was the one that made polygamy illegal. People don't understand that. See, he saw it as a form of slavery. He called it the twin relic with slavery.
Yes.
And that's the reason it's illegal. And polygamy isn't the same as open marriage. People are using the term polygamy as the newest term for an open marriage, and that's not what it is.
No, it isn't.
You know what? They called it swinging in the 90s and open marriage in the 2000s. Polygamy is just the new in word for it. And it's very, very different. Find a new word for free love. Great. You know what? If you want to have sex with multiple partners, fabulous. Don't call it marriage. It's about the ownership of women.
For the men to have the right to have constant new lovers all their life, and for a woman to be destroyed for time and all eternity if she isn't loyal and lonely, is not freedom. That is slavery.
Right, it's bondage.
And why would one person have all the freedom and the other one have all the responsibility? That's just an extreme, sick dual standard. It has nothing to do with freedom. People like it under gay marriage, which is stupid, because in a gay marriage there's two equal partners.
Right.
In polygamy, there's one superior partner, and all the other partners are less and less and less and less equal all their life.
Right. So if you look at it, again, from an organizational structure, in marriage, there's a partnership. Even if it's a homosexual marriage, it's a partnership. It's two people coming together in partnership, in balance and equality. When you have polygamy, you have a pyramid. You have the man at the top, and you have the pecking order.
Right.
It's two very, very different things.
Right.
And everything everyone does in that pyramid goes to feed the guy at the top.
Exactly.
That's what the difference is.
And polygamy is popular worldwide, in and out of religion. These women having these children on welfare aren't necessarily confined to religion, but they are confined to the control of a man.
Right.
That isn't supporting them.
Yeah, this FLDS Mormon brand of polygamy, it has nothing to do with the Mormon Church, obviously, but that's kind of what it's become known as, isn't the only polygamist group that's doing this.
Oh, no.
By any means. Its misperception is that it's only fundamentalist Mormons. And
No.
there are fundamentalist Christians that practice polygamy. There's fundamentalist Muslims that practice polygamy.
And fundamentalist Jewish.
And
that practice
fundamentalist Jewish.
polygamy,
It's, yeah.
And there's a whole...
I think the problem personally sounds like it's fundamentalism.
But
And there's nothing fun about that mentalism.
There's a whole realm of guys that just sell drug on the streets and claim no religion that practice polygamy. They got 10 baby mamas.
That's true. And those baby mamas get their welfare checks and turn them over to their pimp.
Yes, and if they don't, they're going to get beat up. And nobody interferes because, oh, well, that's just the ghetto. Since when was it, oh, well, they're just polygamists? Oh, well, it's just the ghetto. Oh, well, it's just poor people. Where is this oh, well in human rights? Where did we get that some people are just less human than others?
That's always been a problem. It's a problem that we are attempting to overcome. It's a disease that humanity's had for eons. You know, this judgment that other people are worth more or worth less than other people. That's why that was the whole problem with slavery. It was the whole problem with women not being allowed to vote. It's this belief that some people are worth more or worth less than others.
So in the name of religion now, in the name of a patriarchal religion primarily, because that's what's big in the country.
Right.
They want to abolish human rights if it goes against their religion.
That's really what it kind of is.
Whose rights are going to get abolished? The women and the children at the bottom of the pyramid.
Right.
They don't get the medical care, they don't get the education, they get the physical violence and whatever. Come on, what are they going to do? Start jumping virgins into the volcano for a sacrifice now?
Well, yeah, and we've seen, I wish I had the article on me, but I don't. I'm trying to hunt it down so that you and I can talk about it intelligently. This push to allow religious freedom to be more free so that people can practice as they choose. Unfortunately, this was not that long ago. Fortunately, the Supreme Court shut it down. The Supreme Court was wise enough to see that even though it passed Senate, the Supreme Court said, you know, this is not okay. Because if a person can practice as they choose in a religion, and currently there are already human rights abuses that are justified by religious practice, at what end then do we start including animal sacrifice again? Do we start including child sacrifice again? At what point does it get to practice superseding everything and human beings lose the rights that we have fought so hard to get?
And at what point is it okay to murder the infidel? And at what point do we destroy the non-believer in a blood sacrifice to save their soul?
Right.
It's just...
Or like you said, throw the virgin into the volcano.
Right.
Because virgins have the most value.
Oh, yes.
God loves virgins.
Right. How sad that is to even imagine that people are so valueless that anyone could have that kind of control.
Yeah. And it really comes down to owning the value of human beings regardless of who they are, regardless of their age, sex, belief, marital status, creed, shade. Every human being is of exactly the same value. It is only our perception that some are worth more than others that creates this whole human rights issue.
We won't be able to ever cure the insanity that's going on if we don't see every human being with love and understanding and value.
Right, and so a lot of us are here to really present this as a disease. We won't be able to cure the disease until we acknowledge that it actually exists.
We cannot change what we refuse to recognize or see. It's
Right.
impossible. And we need to recognize and see that every single human being has a right to make choices and to be responsible for the choices they make.
Right.
And they need teaching and guidance. That doesn't mean every single human being has a right to take something away from somebody else that they didn't earn. It really means the equal opportunity that this country was based on.
Right.
And how can a person have equal opportunity if they're less than any other human being?
Mm-hmm.
Or any human being? There's no equality in the human. There's no equal opportunity. Because that is just a misnomer.
Right.
It's really been great. You are so educational. And I
Thank
think
you.
so much will be gleaned from this. That every human being is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Every child born is so valuable. The children of today are the nation of tomorrow. And we need to stand up and be counted and make sure that that nation is a better one, not a worse one.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope this helps you understand what goes on inside of polygamous cults everywhere in this nation and other nations. That it is not some strange place at the end of the planet. It's right here in the United States of America. I was born a slave, sold as a slave, and bred as a slave in the name of God and religion. The loss of human rights is not a religious right. When someone else's freedom is taken away in the name of your freedom, something is terribly wrong. This is America. This is not what we stand for. Stand up for equality of all human beings, regardless of race, color, creed, or gender. Polygamy is not equality. It isn't comparable to gay marriage. Not at all. In gay marriage, there's two equal partners. In polygamy, there's one alpha partner and many constantly diminishing partners that age out and are cast aside as the dominant partner goes on to do whatever he will. Polygamy is a form of slavery, not freedom. Thank you for watching.